and welcome back to Bossing Clickbait with Mr. F. Look at that title, look at that thumbnail. You have got a Vaporwave Macbeth, you've got a 10, so it's a listicle, and everyone likes lists, and you've got underused quotes as well. Okay, what's this all about? Well, why are we looking at underused quotes? Because many students will fall back on the same tired quotes, and we need to think about the poor examiner in the summer trawling through all these papers and maybe think about giving them something fresh and new and exciting to read. And that can come from just using some different quotes, which will allow us some different analysis, some different insights into the text. And maybe some of these quotes are better suited to the question that you will get, whether it's a character or a theme question. Who knows? More than that, this is also about linking quotes together. So I'm not just giving you a quote and some things that you could analyze within that quote. I'm giving you the means by which that quote can then link to another quote, either by the same character earlier or later in the play, or a different character because there's a thematic link. But that's just as useful a skill, because if we're building up a body of evidence to support an argument, having a bunch of different quotes working in the same direction from different parts of the play makes for a more coherent and cohesive and top grade answer. Boom. Let's crack on. Macbeth, and nothing is but what is not. So this is just after he's heard the prophecies, and it's a little aside, and he's talking to himself, i.e. to us, the audience, and we're getting an insight into his thought processes. Shakespeare's giving us that as a dramatic device. And what is he saying here? Well, it's slightly paradoxical, isn't it? The language is really confusing. And nothing is but what is not. What it really means is that the only things for him that exist are the things that have not yet happened or been realized. And for him, this is the killing of the king. He's been told he will become king. In his mind, the only way that is possible is if he kills the king, regicide. And now that kind of completely occupies his mind. And so nothing is, i.e., nothing else exists but what is not, which is this imagined future where he has killed or is killing the king. And that's why his body is reacting, if you remember, his hair standing on end and what have you. Now, the language is slightly peculiar, isn't it? And nothing is but what is not. It sounds like something Yoda might say. That, to me, suggests that we could start to think about the witches having put a spell on Macbeth or influencing Macbeth and even corrupting the speech of Macbeth. And I think that's something I would use there, like Macbeth's speech and thought processes, because that's where the speech comes from. And that's what we're witnessing in this kind of aside/soliloquy, has been already corrupted by the influence, the seed that has been sown by this idea of him becoming king, which is the witches have planted in his mind. Then I would link that with something the second witch says in Act 4, Scene 1, where Macbeth goes to see the witches to have more information from them. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Why is that a good pair? Well, we have the idea of violence and blood, pricking of my thumbs. More interesting than that, though, we have this idea of Macbeth being dehumanized, turned into a thing. Something wicked this way comes. Well, that's Macbeth who's just about to arrive. And instead of being someone, it's something. So he's been dehumanized, made into a monster, clearly perhaps by their influence. Wicked. So he's not just a thing, but it's a wicked thing. So we get the idea of evil, the thematic of evil there coming in. And then we have this weird syntax, something wicked this way comes. Really, that sentence should read, this way comes something wicked, or this way something wicked comes. So there we have that corrupted syntax. That word order is off in some way. And we can link that to the riddling, equivocating speech of the witches, and you can tie that into the context of the Jesuit priests or the Catholic priests at the time. And I didn't say this, but if we go back, there's something equivocating and riddling about this, and maybe because what Macbeth is talking about at the time would have been very dangerous to talk about on a stage in front of James I, the idea of killing a king, regicide, when we have the gunpowder plot that's just been prevented. So there we can see a distinct parallel between the two. Something wicked, by having that as the subject of that line instead of the object at the end, emphasizes it. So this is given preeminence, priority there, and that's important too. Now this one is in a similar vein to the riddling, equivocating speech that we've just had in the second witch, and also maybe tying into the corrupted syntax of Macbeth, or the opaque language of Macbeth. Things bad begun make strong themselves by ill. Now this is a very odd sentence, and it's quite hard to parse, to unravel. Things bad begun. What's the bad that has begun? What's the thing that they've done? They've killed the king. Make strong themselves can only get better by continuing to get worse, if you see what I mean. It's tricky. So there's no going back. If you start off badly, the only way is to plow on, to double down, to keep going, and things will improve by getting worse. So it's kind of doubling down on badness is what's going on here. It's very peculiar. It suggests that Macbeth is about to do more terrible things. I think we could easily link this, and I haven't put this in the slides here, to what happens later after the banquet scene, because I think this is Macbeth deciding that there's no way back, and that the only way forward now is to double down on badness, on evil, and push on through. I am bent to know by the worst means the worst. It's saying the same thing, but in clearer language, maybe because he's sure about the course he needs to take. This is in Act 3, Scene 4, after the banquet. For mine own good, all causes shall give way. There's that kind of egotistical self-realization. And then that self-awareness. I am in blood, stepped in so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go over. It's a similar thing as well about he's so steeped in blood that there's no return. So the only way forward is to double down on badness, on evil, and push on through. I'm going to quote something from the University of Cambridge here. They have a blog. It's called the Faculty of English. The title of this thing is Dagger Drawn. It's by someone called Hester. We've got to see this through. And the only way we can do it is to commit more crimes, worse crimes. There's no going back. The couplet here makes it a grimly immoral aphorism, an evil credo. So that's what they thought about that. Okay. Could we tie that to something Lady Macbeth says? Possibly. What's done is done. There's something definitive about that. She's a bit no nonsense, isn't she? She doesn't go in for Macbeth's it's almost like Hamlet-esque self-inquiry, doubts, fears, paranoia. She just is a bit of more matter of fact, more pragmatic, more let's move on. But what's interesting about this, when we have that kind of definitive statement, rubbing of the hands, let's move on, there's a bit of continuity and yet no continuity. Let's look at what she says when she's rambling in her kind of nightmarish, guilt-ridden lunacy at the end of the play. What's done cannot be undone. Now, there's a subtle difference there. We have the verb to be, is, and then here we have a modal verb, cannot be, which suggests a possibility, and here suggests an impossibility. And there's almost, I think, if we were going to pull something out of this, would be we have the prefix undone, a desire for it to be undone. There's a kind of, why is there that damned spot? Why is there that desire for the hands to be clean, which can't be cleaned? Because there's a deep-seated or subconscious desire for it to be undone. There's a regret there. And whilst it's acknowledged, hence the madness, that it can't be undone and that judgment awaits. The desire is there, which maybe humanizes this character who can appear to us as villainous. But I think with the psychological insights from Macbeth's soliloquies and asides, and Lady Macbeth also has that. Try not to see these people as just caricatures, as villains, but also as more human and psychologically real. And that's what Shakespeare allows for with some of the language he gets them to say. All right, let's crack on. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. Now, I'm pretty sure this one gets used. It's not that underused, but I think I'm just going to show you a link here that I think is quite useful. Macbeth, this is what makes him psychologically more real, is that he's aware that he's committing a crime, and so is Lady Macbeth. They're aware of God's judgment. He talks about wishing to jump the life to come. He's aware that, that's why his body shakes in 1.3, Acts 1, Scene 3, with the thought of regicide, because it's such a horrifying crime, and, ultimately God's judgment will be severe because it's going against a divine law, the divine right of kings. So they know they need to operate in darkness when God is not watching, when God is sleeping. Stars, hide your fire. Stars here is a kind of metonym for God, or metaphor for God. Let not light, obviously we can link to God or Christ. See my black and deep desires. My possessive pronoun there is useful. And then that doubling of adjectives, black and deep desires. So, there's a self-knowledge here that's interesting, and an awareness of the terrible deed they're about to commit. Well, in Act 1, Scene 5, Lady Macbeth's soliloquy, come thick night and pour thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, isn't it? Yes, it was the dunnest smoke of hell. Superlative adjective, the use of hell, all of that can be explored. The ultimate blackness of the most evil place in the universe. But what's really interesting here, to link it to what Macbeth has just said, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold. Coming back to that University of Cambridge blog, they talk about multisensory language, and I think that's a nice way of seeing it. The blanket of the dark. There, you got the sense of a smothering darkness, so it's not just the visibility, but there's also a sense of maybe something claustrophobic and that we can feel. But an awareness by Lady Macbeth that she's committing a crime and she needs to operate in darkness so that God can't see. Because if God did see, or the angels saw, they would cry, hold, hold, don't do it, stop, stop. Now, linking these two characters who have a very close relationship together, although eventually Macbeth is foolish and operates by himself, which is where things go wrong with Banquo, etc. But for a long time, they're very close and operating as a partnership. And we see that sometimes in language that echoes one another. So here at the very end of the play, when Lady Macbeth is dead, before my body I throw my warlike shield, lay on Macduff, and damned be him that first cries, hold, enough. Interesting. I just think that's a kind of nice link there between Lady Macbeth's private soliloquy and this idea of the angels or God saying hold, hold, and Macbeth kind of echoing some of that language there. Why else is this interesting? Well, there's a nice circular structure here. Macbeth ends as he began, as a warrior, determined to die with harness on his back. Before my body I throw my warlike shield. And the warlike there reminds us of the warrior and the sword. We'll come to that in a minute. The sword that smoked with bloody execution in Act 1, Scene 2 from the captain's report. The commanding language, lay on Macduff and damned be him. So we get this kind of imperatives there. A bit of irony, damned be him, because Macbeth is already damned. He's killed a king. But the idea is that a coward would be more damned or equally damned if they were to say hold enough. And I think there's something maybe where the tragedy of Macbeth comes from is we see who he was, and even at the end, as he's fallen, the tragedy of Macbeth is that we see the warrior he was return at the end, and that great character trait is still visible in him. And yeah, leave that there. Now, this, of course, this quote gets used a lot, so it's not underused, but maybe certain parts of it are. So I'm looking here at the adjective brave and like Valor's minion. And we were talking about similarities between this very close partnership, Lady Macbeth, Macbeth. So our focus is like Valor's minion. Valor here means bravery. It's being represented in a kind of personified way, like fate. And minion has two meanings. The preferred meaning here will probably be favorite, but you could tease out some ideas with its other meaning of slave or underling or dependent or follower, someone who's servile anyway. So either highly favored or servile dependent, depending on how you want to interpret that or discuss both. Look at what Lady Macbeth says, that I may, upon reading his letter, and she's again talking aloud, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear and chastise with the valour of my tongue. So she knows she's a brave speaker, and we know that she fears Macbeth's milk of human kindness as a weakness. But she's a brave speaker, hence she can pour the spirits in thine ear in convincing him to do what he needs to do. All that impedes thee from the golden round. The golden round, a nice metaphor for crown that you could look at, all suggesting that there are many obstacles in the way. Thine and thee, this is the intimate form and shows the closeness, the proximity between this couple. And yeah, so I think that's a kind of a nice little parallel there. Moving on, I think we've got just a few more left. I wanted this to be 10 minutes. We're approaching 20. Let's crack on. Come on. I have supped full with horrors. Dying as familiar to my slaughterous thoughts cannot now startle me. So again, self-awareness. Macbeth is not a monster, an unreasoning psychopath. He is absolutely capable of self-analysis, of reflection, and he's very like Hamlet, which was written earlier in 1599, 1601. It's very like Hamlet in that he's constantly thinking about what he's doing. Now, he needs to do that for dramatic effect because we need to be able to get inside his mind. But the only reason we need to do that is because Shakespeare wants to flesh him out into a more psychologically real character. I have just supped full of coffee. Macbeth has supped full with horrors. He's drunk them all in. His entire body is sated, but not with alcohol or tea or coffee or anything else you might drink, milkshake, horrors. And it's an interesting metaphor because we can't literally drink in horrors, but it suggests the depths that he's sunk to. Diurnus, noun, familiar, it's now almost like a witch's familiar. You could play with that. To my slaughterous thoughts. Beautiful kind of rhyming language there. Kind of internal rhyme, slaughter, thought. It's as if his thoughts only have one direction, which is slaughter. Cannot now startle me. All right. Now, the last thing I wanted to... That doesn't seem to be linked to anything, does it? Apart from the fact that I've just talked about self-realization. Hey-ho. Anagnorisis. What is anagnorisis? Anagnorisis is a moment in a play, I'm quoting Wikipedia here, or other work when a character makes a critical discovery. I always used to describe it as tragic realization of one's fate. It originally meant recognition in its Greek context, not only of a person, but also of what that person stood for. Anagnorisis was the hero's sudden awareness of a real situation, the realization of things as they stood, and finally, the hero's insight into a relationship with an often antagonistic character in Aristotelian tragedy. Well, when does that happen for Macbeth? If we think of anagnorisis as the hero's sudden awareness, not only of their own fate, but of a kind of crucial insight into a relationship with an antagonist, why not with the witches? I pull in resolution and begin to doubt the equivocation of the fiend that lies like truth. This is brilliant because not only do we have equivocation, which can take us back to the idea of the gunpowder plot and what the Catholics used to have to do, concealing the truth, their own beliefs when they were speaking under oath. You could also link it to the Porter scene, who also mentions equivocation. To the riddling, opaque language of the witches, and the fact that the influence that they've had, that we've seen from the very start and the very start of this video, with nothing is but what is not, continues here, that lies like truth. So we get that kind of paradox, which seems to suggest not only the awareness of what the witches have been doing, the anagnorisis, the tragic recognition of his antagonist, but also still may be, caught in the spell of their corrupting language. Happens again later, so that's 5.5, but at 5.8, and be these juggling fiends, a lovely metaphor to describe them, no more believe that palter with us in a double sense. It's a similar kind of awareness. Boom. Hopefully some of those quotes can be useful for forthcoming mock exams, which might be coming up before Christmas, or for the final exam next summer, or just for your own thinking and thoughts about this wonderful play. That's all for now. I'll be back with something else anon, maybe some poetry. It's been a while. You know what to do. Likey like, subby sub, and I will be back with more felicity anon.